We continue with part two, and we are going to be looking at a series of paintings that we have from a year. And this is again the estate of the Caillebotte family, and it's 1870. So just as a point of reference here, of where we are, this is the same year that we have the Franco-Prussian War. Obviously, the Caillebotte family was not in Paris during this time. What else we have is we need to also remember an important date is 1874, and that's the year of the first Impressionist exhibition. And still about 6 years before we see Gustave Caillebotte showing with the Impressionists. So this can almost be viewed as a study in my mind as much as anything, which is interesting because, again, when we look at where the Impressionists are going, this is much closer to their style of painting than what we normally associate with Gustave Caillebotte. And this is much closer to Caillebotte. And again, this is just a wonderful image of the estate. And the really interesting or fun thing is that the estate is still there. You can actually still go there, and if you're familiar with his paintings, it's wonderful because, again, most of these buildings are still around, including these wonderful gardens on the outside of town. But again, if we keep in mind this upper class aspect to Caillebotte's life, we can definitely see it here. But again, we have this wonderful image, and the key term and an important thing to kind of study when we're looking at Caillebotte is again that use of perspective. And we look at this house, this tiny little mansion really, which has 3 levels to it, colonnades, and it looks so tiny off in the distance in comparison to these 2 figures. I mentioned these gardens. Here's a wonderful painting, 1875, 1 year after the first Impressionist exhibition, showing these wonderful gardens inside of the estate. A very intelligent way to water your plants. Use 2 pictures at once. I'll have to remember that. But again, wonderful use of perspective lines. When we look at the rows and we look at these shells that they have on the top to keep them shaded, all of these lines form these angles that just recede off into the distance and give us this wonderful, wonderful sense of space. Again, you can really use these paintings to almost understand the concept of linear perspective as much as anything. With Caillebotte, though, he's not using his vanishing point is not in the middle of the canvas. It's usually kind of located over to one side. And in most of his paintings, this is a great comparison. This is all family members. Let's see, I believe it is grandmother, there's an aunt and a family friend, and one other individual, if I remember correctly. But you'll notice, again, there's the shift over to the right side here. What we have, again, we have the largest figure over to the left corner, and as we kind of move and get smaller, we're moving towards the right with our perspective going from the left to the right side. But again, we're looking at these family estates, and these are just members of the family. I believe there's an aunt in there, too, if I remember right, actually. Sorry about that. Again, and this estate continues, and there's this wonderful building in the background there that you can see as well. Paris Day, Rainy Day in 1877 is probably the most famous painting by them. And again, when we're using the concept of perspective, this is interesting because he uses 2 different perspective points in this rather than one. When we look at the facade of the building directly to the left of the center of the pole in the background, we can follow that off in 2 directions. And that's really kind of the perspective of the painting. This painting in itself is all about perspective, though, in particular where people are looking. We're forming lines with eyes, and it's often been noted that these 2 folks walking towards us aren't paying attention, and the man actually has to move his umbrella as he's walking past them. But we do get a sensation of loneliness from this as well. Here you can really kind of understand what I was meaning by those perspective lines. And again, we can even see these lines in the street continuing off on the right angle of the linear perspective. And then, again, the lines on the left are moving off in a separate direction. You could even draw a few more perspective points as well. But again, when we look at this and we look at the understudies, this was really a painting that Caillebotte constructed. He put together, did everything one should do with a painting does all, in the classical sense at least, do these drawings and the forming the concept of the composition before you even start to the paint, and again, really strategically placing out where all of the different lines and understandings are. And when you look at Caillebotte's paintings, this is something that you definitely get. As I mentioned, one of the things we very much see from the paintings of Gustave is modern construction, and in particular, we have these metal constructions throughout Paris, these bridges, and we have the famous Saint-Lazare train station, I believe, in the background, made very famous from a series of Monet paintings, and it also appears in the background in the Manet as well. This is kind of, again, a focal point, and again, it's about the vision. It's about these people looking off, and you kind of follow their perspective. We have an influence, though, from the Japanese print as well, and even the concept of photography kind of intermingling. If we notice this person kind of walking off the image, this is something that's kind of a contemporary thing. What we're most used to seeing are things like this, very well constructed, same bridge. Once again, these wonderful perspective lines leading us off into the distance. And any painting with a dog in it is always a winner with me. But again, in comparison to the previous image that we looked at, these are all formalized people. We do get the fly on the wall sensation, but at the same time, this is very much a normal composition in the sense of everyone is well put within the frame of the canvas. But again, this changes, and this has something to do with if you think about the way you would take a photograph on the street or something of this nature. Oftentimes you have people kind of walking in and out of the frame and not settled completely in the frame. And this is something, as we continue to see art, this is something we definitely will see appear more and more. And again, we trace that back to the concepts of photography at work. You couldn't find a better example of linear perspective than this. You can even find there's a person hovering, it seems way off in the distance there, right above what we think of as our vanishing point. And again, a simple concept, all of the lines just going to one point, creating a space. And again, when we look at this, we see a lot of this type of this is the second time at least that we've seen this kind of recreation of something. Again, if we think of the floor strippers from the first part of this lecture, this kind of continues along these lines. We need to remember we're not that far off from the Franco-Prussian War. We also get views into interiors, but again, when we look at the work of Caillebotte, it's very intimate, the work he does. Again, when we think of the majority of his paintings, they're not done for profit. Again, he's extremely wealthy. And in fact, in 1874, the first year of the Impressionist show, we know that his father actually passes on, and he becomes even more wealthy. He gets a large chunk of the estate, and this continues until 1878, and when his mother passes on, and he actually again even receives more money then. He dies very young. He dies when he's 45, and he really kind of just has this attitude towards his life that he's going to enjoy everything that he has, kind of attitude. So he actually enjoys quite a wonderful life, and he also spends a significant amount of money on these works. And again, the Museum d'Orsay, the first major piece of their collection actually is Gustave Caillebotte's collection that he wanted to be put together. Again, very intimate portraits of interiors, friends and family, and that type of thing is what we see. But we have a few paintings here over the subject of knitting, where again, this is a very personal activity, and if you think of one of the older members of your family sitting in a corner and doing this, this is kind of what he's observing. But this is also an interesting painting because of the complexity of the background and the simplicity of the foreground. Here is Madame Marshall Caillebotte. Again, when we look at this, a very different perspective than the painting we just saw before. This is a much more fixed in concepts of realism and a straight-ahead portraiture here, and very much this effort to kind of show this realistic depiction. Madame Marshall Caillebotte, I'm not, again, we need to remember that both his father and his brother, I believe, are named Marshall, so judging by the appearance, this could very well be his mother. She does look like an older person, and as I mentioned, his father does pass on right around this time period, so that could be a good explanation for what she's actually wearing as well. An important thing with portraiture like this is to always look at what's in the background to enjoy all of the different aspects that are put into the painting, and this is absolutely no exception to that rule. This is, interestingly enough, if you listen to my lecture on Sargent, this is Madame Guttrell one more time, or Portrait of Madame X, and interestingly enough, this is Gustave Caillebotte's version, and it's kind of funny to me because, again, she was supposed to wear kind of this lavender powder, which would explain why she kind of has this whitish kind of glow in the painting by Sargent. But when we look at it in the portrait by Caillebotte, he's really even shifted her over to being blue in the greatest sense, and this is really kind of accented even further by the clothing. We have a portrait of a man sitting in the background, and you can see how much he's changed the composition over from the original one. He's really made this entire painting this blue, almost a conversation about the color blue. It almost looks like a painting from Picasso's blue period now that I look at it. It has that soft, very relaxing kind of blue tone to it. When we look at the portrait of a man, it's a very interesting painting because the background, the wallpaper matches the sofa almost too well, and we get lost, and I think this is almost the point of the painting, within these stripes. We start at the ceiling, but then they continue into the couch, and it's almost perfectly lined up between that pillow and the back wall. Man at a cafe. Again, we look at a lot of the Caillebotte paintings. To me, it almost seems like he's looking at the other Impressionist and kind of following along with their subject matter. We know any number of these artists that we have working from cafe scenes, and again, when we look in the background, I believe we have a reflecting mirror. Again, this popular concept at the time of these constructions of these larger mirrors, it was kind of a newer thing at this time, so this is another thing we see in a lot of these paintings. And again, the concept of reflection is always kind of played with as well. Interesting use of composition here. We kind of have this moving off into space, but using the mirror as the device to do that. Portrait of Henry Cordier. I believe, if I remember correctly, he's a linguistics instructor and also an expert on the Chinese culture. He actually lived in China for a part of his younger life. And again, when I was speaking about this Orientalism that was really occurring within Europe at the time, both France and England, and I'm sure everywhere else. Again, when you think about him, he actually has kind of a role in the greater scheme of this because, again, he was this linguistics and also cultural expert on the Chinese culture, and he was obviously a friend with Caillebotte and played a role in those circles as well.